Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. Thanks for joining us in the SRE Practitioner Series. I'm your host, Suresh GP, and this is a podcast where we bring in real world practitioners to share their real world experience to the world of SRE. So today, I'm so delighted to have Faisal Iqbal, who's joining us from Canada, who is the Director of Network Security SRE at Royal Bank of Canada. And we're going to talk about something very specific about network reliability engineering. But let's welcome Faisal to our podcast. Thank you so much, Faisal, for taking time and sharing your experience in the world of SRE. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you, Suresh. This is a great opportunity. Thank you for providing the platform. I'm excited at the opportunity of sharing some of my thoughts.
Awesome. So let's jump into this whole episode on network reliability engineering. So what is network reliability engineering and how has it evolved from the world of SRE? As we all know, site reliability engineering originated in 2003 with Google, and we had network engineering by then already. And how has that evolved and what was the genesis of this network reliability engineering?
Uh, so I would consider network reliability engineering as a sub-principle of site reliability engineering. Um, one of the key things that site reliability engineering wanted to do was make sure that applications were reliable. As a sub practice of that, and as a continuation of it, network reliability engineering has flourished, and to the extent where for modern applications, companies want to make sure that the network itself is reliable.
Right.
Um, in short, that's what it is. And to what you said, I think there's been leaps and bounds of evolution since 2003, since Google popularized this whole concept. And I think there's many different nuggets of it that we get to see across the board.
Awesome. Now, I just, for viewers, I want to give a little bit of an introduction to Faisal. Faisal Iqbal is an engineering leader focused on network reliability engineering in large enterprise environments. What is very interesting with Faisal is he works at the intersection of network security automation and site reliability engineering. That's a pretty loaded one because there's so much, it's when network goes down, everything goes down. I mean, it's so much
Yeah.
like the backbone of infrastructure. And what I've seen is that as you help make the paradigm shift from being device centric towards outcome driven, it's so valuable. So let's talk a little bit more onto how is this network reliability engineering different from traditional network engineering that we have done in the past, and it has
Yeah.
worked. I mean, let's be honest, it has worked in the past.
Absolutely.
It should not be a old wine in a new bottle. So everybody starts to ask, what does network reliability engineering mean? And have we fundamentally changed the way we worked before when it comes to NRE?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question because I think one of the ways traditional engineering has always been about implementation of stable controls. So
Hmm.
the key goal for traditional network engineering was that stable controls, stability is your focus. As long as you implement it and network operation keeps the lights on, everything is fine. And I think over time, we've noticed that there is a shift in understanding that, well, it isn't just about stability. You have to make sure that the network is reliable. So all the other, whatever features you have, those are being delivered and your customer is happy. So there's been a much more customer centric approach. Um, the way NRE improves the reliability for applications or for systems, it is through measurement, automation, and continuous learning. And I think the last one is important because you can automate many different facets of your network today, but if you're not learning and if you're not improving over time, it's a moot point.
Right. Absolutely. So we'll take a pause there. I just want to drink water. Yeah, the beauty of this recording is you can pause and then we can start from where it is. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, in terms of network reliability engineering, what does an engineer actually do from a day-to-day basis? We always talk about roles and responsibilities. And when it comes to NRE, and I'm talking about my previous experience managing large infrastructure teams, every time a P1 incident happens, there is chaos everywhere. And network reliability engineers are the most sought after people just to make sure that everything up and running. So because the cost of downtime is humongous, right?
Yeah.
So with that said in mind, how has this role of network engineers evolved with NRE, and what do they do on a day-to-day basis? We in the past we talked about software-defined networks and
Mhm.
areas. So how has that helped NREs to shift their roles and responsibilities on a day-to-day basis?
Absolutely. And again, I'll bring up the phrase keeping the lights on because I think that kind of goes hand in hand with network
Yeah.
operations.
Right.
And a lot of network engineers were, as you said, that high priority incident, a P1 or a P2, they'd call the lead engineer, he'd get on a call and try to fix something. So I think the mindset here for a network reliability engineer is really around being a systems engineer
Hmm.
because they're really thinking along systems. So people, process, technology, a combination of the three, right? Their job is really not to keep the lights on, and their job is more to prevent
Yeah.
having those high priority incidents, right?
Right.
So, and how they do that is really, if you were to have, let's say, service level objectives or service level indicators, you're collecting metrics, and before an incident, actually before a full-blown high blast radius incident actually happens, you can mitigate and in some ways prevent happening from that, so you won't even need to go into remediation.
Right. And it's interesting that you talk about system engineering, because what I've really found it difficult for a lot of people is that we all act in silos. We have that
Yeah.
expertise of what we know as part of network, storage, database, and stuff like that, that we are very good in that part. But
Yeah.
we lack that end-to-end understanding, which is typically the system thinking, because
Right.
you're trying to look at across the entire value chain and not
Yeah.
just in silos. So from your perspective, how easy is it to build that system engineering aspect, the system thinking aspect, considering that you only have limited knowledge about the component or device that you're operating at? Is that takes time, or what kind of best practices to how to develop and inculcate a system thinking approach?
Absolutely. I think part of it is comes from, you have to pick one expertise, but you also have to continuously learn from others
Right.
about their expertise. But at the same time, I think part of it evolves as you work in a team, and some of us work in distributed teams, and people come with very different experiences, right? So even if you're talking to an engineer who has never worked in, let's say, pure network engineering or pure network security engineering, or a developer who has only done fresh out of school, computer science grad, has never really worked in large networks, there's a lot of exchange that can happen. And I think up to a certain extent, that sort of knowledge sharing is what enables good network reliability engineers to continue down this field.
No, that's a great part to do it. And that brings to our next question in terms of SRE and DevSecOps. Now, I always tell SRE and DevSecOps are twin sisters, right? If you talk about reliability, it's not just the infrastructure reliability, but
Yeah,
also about making sure that there's no vulnerabilities, there's no threats, there's no longer attacks. So they go hand
sure.
in hand together. So when we talk about SRE and DevSecOps, how do they apply into the network world? And
Yeah,
particularly when reliability is of the topmost parameter, we call it as reliability as a first-class citizen. How does
yeah,
that play out?
absolutely. If you think of, I'd say there's definitely twin sisters is a great way. I never thought of that. That's a great way to put it. I would say SRE provides, or NRE to be more specific, provides the reliability framework. So there's the service level objective, the service level indicators, um, and DevSecOps or DevOps provides the integration delivery mechanism. So developers have been crucial in making that change because they can basically write the code and make systems do what traditionally an analyst would have done. So what that means for a lot of network teams today is that um, it's infrastructure as code. That's policy as code.
Correct.
You would see more topology as code.
Correct.
Before, in some of the remediation automation, you'd see that there's a lot of prevention and pre-checks happening, understanding whether or not something can, a change before the change actually occurs, can be what kind of post checks or pre checks can we do for that change to, so that you're not really carrying on the burden of another issue with your change. So things like that, right?
Right. And I think as we go through this whole part, a lot of people just struggle about the do's and don'ts. So
Yeah.
if I put that into perspective, what are the biggest do's and don'ts when you actually adopt to network reliability engineering? Sometimes I wonder if network reliability engineering is for everybody, because there has to be some level of prerequisites that at a foundation level that you have to build in place before you step into the world of NRE. Like we're talking that in AI, for example, right? If your data
Yeah.
is bad, your data
Correct.
quality and data accuracy is bad, your AI
Yeah.
cannot do wonders, even though you shift your paradigm towards the next ways of working. So what are from your experience, what are some of the do's and don'ts when it comes to adopting network reliability engineering?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great question. I think the starting point for most of it is a system SLO for uptime. So
Right.
you really have to decide on, do you want to be 2 nines, 3 nines, 4 nines? What kind of uptime you're shooting for? And
Sure.
based on that, you understand your acceptable error rate. So let's say whatever the inverse is, like 0.1, 0.01. And I think somehow you have to be open to the idea of start small but think big.
Right.
If you start with 20, 30, 50 different metrics and say that I'm going to start to monitor all of these, I'm going to monitor the network end to end, then you're essentially becoming a network operations team again, and not so much a network reliability engineering team.
Sure.
And really start with a few key metrics. And one of them, like one of my favorite ones, is user perceived latency.
Hmm.
So this is not the latency that we're seeing on dashboards or alarms or anything, but a user is reporting sluggishness or slowness. And that is where your NRE, if you do like, are all my API calls taking the right kind of time? What is the round trip for authentication? Things like that. That can actually have a huge impact in your user experience.
Awesome. Like you talk about user perceived latency, because all those times it's the dashboards look green and the customer's bleeding red, like it's the watermelon syndrome that we see. But it's also about that sentiment that your tools are not going to pick up everything that comes in,
Yeah.
because just
Yeah.
because your customer is not reporting doesn't mean that
Mhm.
everything looks green.
Yeah.
So that perceived interaction about the user experience goes
Yeah.
a lot to do. Are we being sensitive beyond the numbers? Because numbers can be highly misleading.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, your numbers and stats always look to be good when you are doing cumulative. But in
Uh,
reality, that one person had a very bitter experience and could say
yeah.
that this did not make me comfortable. And looking at a
Yeah.
Black Friday sale or a kind of a Christmas Eve, it would be a very
Yeah.
difficult part to do that. But also for from your perspective, what should um, enterprise not automate in NRE? And I'll give you a context to this. Automation is king. Everybody loves automation. And the
Yeah.
moment I talk about automation, people's antennas goes up. But there are some bad automation as well, right? I mean, just to give you an example of how many times you've called up the service desk, it says, press one for this, press two for this. I'm waiting to press nine because I want to
Mhm.
talk to someone else
Right.
who would understand myself. So that's a bad automation because you have not
Yeah.
understand the persona to whom you're
Yeah.
actually devising that strategy. So from your perspective, what should our enterprise not automate in NRE?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. Great question. And I think part of it is going to be one of the big don'ts of network reliability engineering is that without understanding a use case properly, if you're automating something and not having done the proper due diligence on the risk and impact of your automation, that is a big no-no. That you shouldn't do that.
Right.
don't automate something that would have a high blast radius um, or doesn't have the proper safeguards. You haven't been able to test it in a dev environment, a pre-prod environment. Um, it's amazing. To your point, like there's the dichotomy of automation ideas. People, it separates us, right? Because some people are huge proponents. They're like, let's automate everything and eliminate all the different departments that are actually working. And then there's the other side of it where we're saying that, you know what, don't automate because that will put us at risk that we don't need to be at. And a lot of it is because we don't do proper testing at a pre-production level where we're feeling comfortable that there is strong safeguards for things to be in production. And yeah, which I'd say is like those types of changes, high blast radius and things without proper safeguards, right? Those are the two big categories.
That's great. And now, as you look at large enterprises and some of the common mistakes, what are some of the common mistakes when they try to combine DevSecOps with NRE? Because at one end, we are talking about reliability, but it's also about the security says, hey, hold on, we are not going to release this patch because we are not comfortable. It
Yeah.
looks to be fishy. Of course, they want to protect the environment. They want to safeguard the customer data. But at the one end, we are looking at velocity. We are looking at release rate. We are looking at faster turnaround time and improved deployment frequency. So what are some of the common mistakes that you see when you combine DevSecOps with NRE?
I think something you mentioned. So I'm going to take your words on this because you said we all worked in silos, right? So that silo is a big mistake because a lot of application teams, and especially in large enterprises, a lot of application teams they're building an application, they're worried about the customer, they're worried about their application, um, and anytime there's a high priority incident, they're quick to blame another team. They're
Right.
quick to blame mainly the network team, but in most cases. But the reason that I say that is because it's easier to rule out the other issues that the
Right.
application is facing.
Right.
And whereas the network is like it is a bigger component, so it's easier to shift blame there. And the other thing that I would say is um, focusing too much on tools, right? So the silo is definitely a huge mistake because if there's teams talk to each other, and I've seen that situation improve recently, but I would say more so that the reliability on tools or different types of tools, having three different types of tools that do somewhat the same thing, or having a number of tools for a number of different types. And it creates a lot of cognitive dissonance for the analyst who's sitting there. It could very well be somebody who's there at the middle of the night, has no idea how to work with all of these tools, and they're having to go through like 20 different things, run log reports, run packet captures, run all of these other like on newer tools that they may not fully understand. So I'd say yeah, those two would be my top two mistakes.
Well, I like the word that you talked about, cognitive dissonance. We are in a world of splurge of tools. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a plethora of tools that they have. They have duplicate things around because everybody has their own shiny pet toy and tool that they want to use and then leverage. And everybody says, we have all these tools. Can you leverage that? And
yeah,
we are doing this again and again. It puts a lot of mental pressure because the tools are supposed to make your life a lot more easier. But in the
right,
other hand, we are trying to grapple and try to normalize those findings from all these different tools and
yeah,
kind of bring that one story to the
yeah,
executive leader, where the executive leader says that, okay, I have three reports. It's like the best analogy I can think about is if you remember when we had COVID, we all
uh-huh,
use this the meter for us to look at the oxygen levels, and every
yeah,
meter that you used had different calibrations, and you never
right,
knew what was the percentage of oxygen that was actually there. And it's
hmm,
similar to that. Every tool
right,
gives you, but there is a level of calibration that we have to do it, which if you
exactly,
don't do it correctly, then it will make you in a sense of panic because it is not something that is reliable. I mean, we are talking about
yeah.
reliability of one end. If our tools are not reliable, how are we going to propose those whole reliability? So that brings up to our final question, and we can talk for hours. But what mindset do you think network engineers today should have, or anybody who's getting into the world of network engineering to become a good network reliability engineer? I mean, what is the kind of, what I call as attitude, behavior, culture, or
Yeah,
mindset that needs to be in place to really play this role at an A game, right? You're not just doing it because you had no other thing, you want to get a paycheck. You really need to
yeah,
be passionate about doing that. But
yeah.
what's your few thoughts around the mindset that's important as to succeed as a network lab engineer?
And I think core of it is in the ownership methodology. So how you approach, instead of thinking it in terms of ownership of devices, you think in terms of ownership of systems
Mm,
and ownership of outcomes. Because at the end of the day, the customer doesn't really care if your device is up or down.
right.
So that's the least of the customer's worry.
Sure.
The customer really cares that when I click on something, does that really go boom, or is there like a sluggishness? Or so that end user and that customer can be an internal user, an external user, whatever it may be. I think that's a, a big shift in mindset shift for a network reliability engineer to succeed, because they have to think that they have to put themselves in the customer's shoes and think from their perspective. And in a way, you would have to have more changes, because let's say if you can't be afraid of making changes thinking that, oh well, what if this goes wrong? Of course you have to test it and make sure there's a certain amount of change safety, but you also a certain degree of change safety, but you also have to make sure that you're doing enough changes that are automated changes. So you're really making sure that systems run by themselves. And again, coming back to the core concept, you're thinking in terms of systems and not so much about your device, or not so much about your virtual machine somewhere out there. Because
That,
device, I think traditionally everybody thinks it's an on-prem device. So
absolutely. And the other one I would just say about the network reliability engineer, and for that, any SRE for that matter, about mindset is that you need to be a good problem solver. Because a
yeah,
lot of times people think about, I'm doing this because I'm fixing an incident, because fixing an issue and an incident is going to happen repetitively. So, as a problem solving, you are trying to not only fix the problem, but
yeah,
prevent and triage that part that does not reoccur again. And that's a
yeah,
very interesting part of you need to be problem solving. The third part I think is important, in addition to what you said, is we really need to be effective collaborators, because you only know
yeah,
one part of the puzzle. The whole side of
yeah,
the puzzle is when we go there and go there and talk to other people. Because I'm reminded of a quote from Robin Sharma. He says that a bad day for the ego is a good day for your soul. What it
true.
means is that sometimes you might be wrong, right?
Yeah,
But when you go there and admit that in front of your colleague,
yeah,
then you will be open to understand what else could have gone wrong. And
yeah,
that's the kind of thought process we need to have. We all make mistakes in spite of all
yeah.
our experience and expertise, but we
Mhm.
need to kind of be open and receptive to say that I don't have all the answers. I might be wrong, but
Yeah,
I am willing to learn. That continuous learning and continuous sharing of information between your teams, because you
yeah,
don't want to get into a pigeonhole that this is what we have done in the past,
yeah,
and
yeah,
just not being confined to the traditional ways of working. Because with all these technologies and trends that are happening along with the open source community, how can we leverage some of the best practices across group?
yeah,
And finally, I always think that people have to move away from the enterprise mindset towards industry mindset. That means go
yeah,
out and speak with
yeah,
other network engineering colleagues around the world.
yeah,
And that's one of the
yeah,
reasons we brought this SRE Practitioner Series, because we will learn from each one of you as experts and then see how we can bring this cumulative experience for knowledge sharing as well as apply that work back to your workplace. So these are some of the things I would probably also add as we start to build that mindset, because at the end of the day, we don't we cannot learn everything by ourselves, but if we
no,
can able to learn from others and apply
yeah.
that, we probably will be making our life easier and the organization life easier as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
Awesome. It's been a pleasure, Faisal, for to speak to you at the SRE Practitioner Series. And I hope that we will get more people inspired in the world of network reliability engineering. And we wish you great success in your journey with Royal Bank of Canada. And I
Thank you.
hope that you can continue to inspire in your post. And final question is, how can people reach out to you? What's the best way to reach out if they want to have a questions on NRE?
I'm on LinkedIn, so
Sure.
just feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of SRE Practitioner Series. So please make sure that you subscribe to our channel and make sure that you apply some of these nuggets of wisdom that you heard from Faisal back to your workplace. And I'm hoping that you will have a great team implementing SRE and be a successful SRE across. Thank you so much.